Stacking weaknesses in Oblivion Remastered will let you take down Umbra and the 3 Argonians without breaking a sweat. This video digs into the calculations of how damage stacking works in the context of poison damage. Magic damage stacking works in very similar ways, which I'll briefly recap as well at the end of the video. Now with that, let's dig into poison damage. So as shown in my combat poisons video, there are very viable paths to producing poisons that combine shock damage, fire damage, and damage health to do about 30 points of damage per second on an enemy, even on master difficulty. Now, we're going to talk about how we increase that to hundreds or thousands of damage per second. When you hit an enemy with a 100% weakness to fire spell, his weakness to fire will become 100%. Now if you have a poison that does 9 points of damage per second, that fire poison is going to do 18 points per second because the 100% weakness to fire will multiply the fire damage component by 2. Keep in mind, if you're wearing armor, this can reduce your spell effectiveness and reduce that number. So if your spell effectiveness is 95%, you might only stack 95% instead of 100%. So we're going to use 100% in this video here just to keep the numbers easier. Now if I also hit that enemy with 100% weakness to poison, and he ends up with 100% weakness to poison and 100% weakness to fire, then I'm going to have a fire multiplier of 2 and a poison multiplier of 2, which means my 9 points of fire damage per second will now become 36 points of fire damage per second. So the key thing to note here is that most poison damage effects will be amplified by 2 different types of weaknesses, and then those weaknesses multiply together. Now, if you combine weakness to fire and weakness to poison with weakness to magic, and you put weakness to magic at the end of your spell chain, each cast is now going to increase the weakness to poison and weakness to fire by an additional 100%. The reason you need magic to weakness here, weakness to magic, is that without it, you won't be able to scale weakness to poison and weakness to fire past 100%. Now if you have all 3 and weakness to magic is last, then each subsequent hit of the spell will increase the weakness to fire and weakness to poison by an additional 100%. So after 5 casts, your new damage becomes 6 times 6 for the multiplier side, which is 36. And then 36 times 9, which is 324, will be your new damage per second, which is more than enough to comfortably take down any enemy on master difficulty in a second. One thing to note here, which is very important, is that if you try to use the same weapon that you use to stack up your weaknesses and then try to apply your poison damage from that same weapon, your damage won't be amplified by the multiplier, and you're going to do the same amount of damage that you would have done without any stacking effects being applied. So if you're using a weapon to stack up your weaknesses, then you're going to want to have a second weapon in order to be able to do the amplified damage. So now if we want to amplify our poison with shock damage, fire damage, and damage health, we're going to want to make sure we have weakness to fire, weakness to shock, weakness to poison, and weakness to magic. All of these effects will be amplified by weakness to poison, but the difference will come in that second effect, which for shock will be weakness to shock, and for fire will be weakness to fire, and for damage health will be weakness to magic. So to stack these weaknesses even quicker, you can alternate between 2 different spells or weapons. By alternating the cast, you're going to scale up the weakness percentages a lot quicker, but there's a catch, which you already saw earlier. If you stack the weaknesses using a dagger in a spell, for example, then when you hit the enemy with the dagger to inflict the poison damage, your amplified damage will be limited to the portion of the cast attributable to the spell. Let's look at that with an example. If you do dagger spell, dagger spell, dagger spell, you stack 3200% weaknesses across the board. Now after the 5th hit with the dagger, the weakness was 1900%, which means the 6th cast from the spell becomes 1900 plus 100, which is equal to 2000%. And then 2000% would make the multipliers 21. So if you go about it like that, the fire and shock damage will each equal to about 146,000, and then damage health will equal to about 106,000 for a grand total of 400k damage. But if you use a different dagger on that last hit for the poison damage effect, then you're going to get the full amplified damage that's based on the 3200% and do over 1 million damage. So if you continue to stack things like this, eventually you can even do billions of damage in seconds. Now keep in mind, various enemies, including a lot of undead enemies, will have 100% weakness to poison, which means that to be able to inflict poison damage on them at all, you need to stack weaknesses on them. So just keep an eye out on how you stack the damage and how you do that final hit with the poison damage, because you see with the numbers here, that actually matters. Now when it comes to magic damage from spells or from enchanted weapons, the stacking mechanics work very much the same way. The only difference is that elemental damage, like fire and shock, when it comes from a spell or as an enchantment on your weapon, will be amplified by weakness to fire or weakness to shock, depending on what the effect is, and then the magic weakness. Whereas for poison, it was the elemental weakness and weakness to poison. In both cases, you should also ensure that weakness to magic is the last effect on your weakness spell chain or enchantment, as this is what's going to allow you to stack elemental weaknesses beyond 100%. Both options have their own pros and cons. On master difficulty, poison damage will probably allow you to do much larger amounts of damage without having to stack as much, given that poison damage isn't reduced on master difficulty the way regular magic damage is. The trade-off is that poison damage has to be inflicted per enemy, whereas magic damage can be used with an increased radius that lets you both stack weaknesses on multiple enemies at the same time and inflict magic damage at the same time. But again, the trade-off is that on master difficulty, if you're doing that, that damage is going to be reduced by about 1/6. That said, both are very viable ways to do large amounts of damage on enemies and take them down a lot quicker. But that's enough math for today. If you have any questions, please comment below.